Hello, everyone, and welcome to Circuit Stream's VR Bowling Minigame Workshop. Super excited to have you all here, kicking off the very first workshop of the new year. And Happy New Year to you all as well. I hope you had a great holiday season and looking forward to a wonderful 2021. Hi, Brianna. Nice to see you. Kyle, pleasure to see you joining us. Lee, Samer, Vlad, Arya, all great. Now, before I do continue on, I would hate to be talking without anyone being able to hear me or see me. So if you could let me know in the chat there to the right where you guys have already noticed, let me know if you can hear me and see me. I see Alex loud and clear. Mike Gerald, bonjour. We can hear you. Liam, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for letting me know. I'm super excited to be back here hosting another workshop and webinar for you all. You're very small, but I can hear you. Thank you, Peter. Yes, I want to share the content rather than my face here, but I do appreciate everyone taking the time out of the day to join us for this exciting workshop and webinar. Today, we will be going through how to create your own mini VR bowling experience. And I do see a comment here by Janet. Yes, Janet, we will receive the recording after this has been completed. We do record all of our workshops and webinars and send it out to all registrants, so no worries at all. Now, for those of you who are joining us live, not on the recording, but live here today, few housekeeping items. So to the right, there is a chat. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves, share your LinkedIn profiles, support each other with any questions that may be out there. And beside the chat, there is also a questions tab. Now, we will have an in-depth Q&A session at the very end of this workshop. However, if there are any questions throughout, feel free to toss them into the questions tab. It allows us to easily track what hasn't been answered, what's been answered, answer them throughout the workshop and webinar, but also at the very end in our in-depth Q&A session there. Now, beside the questions tab, there is also a polls tab. So I'm going to be tossing in polls throughout this workshop and webinar just to gauge the experience of the audience, see what devices you may own, what industries you're looking forward to apply this to. Now, for instance, I'm going to toss in a poll here just as practice, but feel free to answer it. I'm curious to know about everyone who's joining our workshop. What devices do you own? So I just published the poll in that polls tab. Let me know, what devices do you own for VR or AR? Maybe both. Do you have a Quest, maybe a Valve Index? Let me know. It looks like you guys are getting familiar with the layout. That's good. So polls tab, we got a lot of Oculus Quest people here, a lot of mobile phone users as well, a couple or a few Valve Index. So lots of different headsets out there. Wonderful. Now, without further ado, let's get going into this workshop and webinar. The agenda for today will be to do a quick introduction, about 5-10 minutes, introducing you all to who we are, what we do here at Circuit Stream, and then we're going to lead our way into the mini VR bowling game, where my colleague will come kickstart a VR project and help everyone create their own, maybe even first VR bowling game experience. That will take 30 to 45 minutes. Following that, I'm going to come back, join in, wrap up the presentation, offer some extra and additional resources, and then we'll hold our live Q&A session at the very end of this presentation. Now, again, this recording, it will be available for everyone who had registered. So if it is quite late for you, don't worry, you will receive the recording once it's finished. And all the project files and resources that we'll be using and working with today for the mini VR bowling game will also be emailed to you after the workshop. So if you fall behind as you're trying to walk through this all, don't worry, you'll get the recording to work on your own time. If you find we're going a little too fast, don't worry at all. Sit back, relax, observe, watch, and you'll get those resources later on to help move your project along further. But let's get with the introductions. My name is Stefan, and I'm part of the education team here at Circuit Stream. I have over 7 years of experience in the tech industry, working with travel IT companies, learning management system providers, ERP and business integration platforms, and now in the beautiful world of augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, an icebreaker, an interesting fact about myself that I saw David shout out earlier in the chat. I was a member of Water Polo Canada. I trained with the 2008 Beijing Olympic team. I didn't, however, get to go to the Olympics, but it was a wonderful experience nonetheless. And today I will be joined by my wonderful colleague, Usman, who goes by Ozzy Mir. Now, Ozzy is our lead instructor and XR developer here at CircuitStream. He has over 12 years of Unity experience, 8 years of XR, VR, and AR development. And an interesting fact icebreaker about Ozzy here, he's a member of a jazz band as well. He plays the drums. So any of you drum fanatics out there, give Ozzy a shout and he'd be more than happy to chat about what's he up to these days. Now, a little bit about CircuitStream. So who are we? Well, we're a team of about 20 people located all around the globe, mainly in North America and South America. And CircuitStream started in 2015 when everyone was creating content and wanting to create these VR and AR projects and applications. We actually went a different route. We noticed the gap in helping people learn how to create, manage, and implement these experiences. And since 2015, we've had the pleasure to teach over 30,000 people how to create, implement, and manage VR and AR projects at their workplaces or as a personal interest. My apologies. Now, we all come from different backgrounds, from computer sciences, engineering, electrical engineering, business, sports, entertainment, you name it. And we've all come together now to help promote this technology to everyone else. And CircuitStream is also a Unity certified training partner. And training partners are selected based on their knowledge, focus on quality, and commitment to providing the highest level of Unity training to really anyone around the world. And not to mention, CircuitStream is an official channel partner with Unity as well. And that means we deliver training and application development services in the architecture, engineering, construction, and automotive, as well as the transportation and manufacturing markets. Now, there's three main things that we do here at CircuitStream, but our bread and butter, what we've been doing since 2015, is education and training. And that's the first kind of biggest focus here at CircuitStream. And these logos are just some of our partners and students that we've had the pleasure join us into our programs to help learn how to create and implement VR and AR experiences. From Raytheon, Boeing, Accenture, VMware, various universities and post-secondary institutions, and Hershey's, the chocolate company. So that chocolate will be delicious. You best believe it. But with that, how do we tend to do this really? Well, it's two main ways that we deliver these education and courses. There's our beginner-friendly XR development with Unity course, 10 weeks long, 4 hours a week, and the next course is on February 15th. And then we have a more intermediate advanced course, our live and online XR Project Accelerator program. 8 weeks, 6 hours a week, and this next course starts on March 1st. But I won't get into it too much detail right now. We'll continue on with the presentation. Now, for those of you who might have an interest in learning more about our courses and the XR Development with Unity course as a beginner, feel free to join us on our next course information session. It's on the 27th of January at 3 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific, if I'm not mistaken. So again, we'll toss in a link probably at the end here, if not right now by my colleague Dayon here. And we'd love to have you with us in that info session and answer any questions about the program that you may have. Now, what differentiates us with all of the other providers out there? Well, it's really the one-on-one support and mentorship where everyone and anyone comes in with their own ideas or projects that they want to create and develop. And all of our students get 1 hour of private weekly one-on-one sessions to work on those ideas and projects. Something to add to their portfolio at the end, something to show for and maybe even bring back to the workplace. Now, we do also have several short courses. They're between 3 to 6 weeks long, part-time, covering C#, Quest, the HoloLens, design in XR, and I'll get into that later on today. Now, the second thing that we do here at CircuitStream is content creation and consultation. That's alongside the education and training that we do as well. Now, all of our instructors are current VR AR developers working with some of the partners listed here to help build and implement AR and VR projects at their organization. So all of our instructors, the work they're currently doing with these other companies, they bring in back into our programs. So everything you learned, even today on this workshop, will be up-to-date, relevant material applicable to today's work. Now, the third thing that we do here at CircuitStream, alongside education and training and content creation, is an XR platform that we launched in the winter of 2019, I want to say. And this allows people to easily host their applications on, scale, distribute, and manage these projects, as well as to track, measure, and analyze learning activities. For those of you interested in learning more about that, check out our website. Feel free to reach out to some of our team here, and we'd be more than happy to touch on that a little bit more. But now that you've learned a little bit about us here at CircuitStream, what are you going to learn today on this mini VR bowling game? Well, today you'll learn how Unity is used to build virtual reality games and apps. We'll also show you how to set up a project in Unity, how to throw objects in VR, makes sense, a bowling ball, and how to implement and manipulate physics in VR. Now, with all of those, we'll also go into how to create basic interactions in virtual reality as well. Now, I'm going to toss in a poll here, and I love asking this on all of our workshops and webinars. Really helps us gauge, who's joining us. Do we need to spend more time in the beginning, maybe go into more in-depth stuff? I'm publishing a poll now, and I'd love to know, how much Unity experience do you have on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 being I've never heard of Unity, 10 being that you're a Jedi Master, the Chuck Norris of Unity. You could come teach our programs here. So I'm taking a look at the results, and it seems like a fairly even spread throughout. I'd say more so beginners than advanced learners, but still some of those folks kicking around there. Wonderful, great, great. So for those of you who said 0, what is Unity? Well, Unity is a free 3D development engine for building games, simulations, and experiences. It's the easiest way to begin making apps for XR. Now, XR stands for extended reality, and that's an umbrella term that captures AR, augmented reality, VR, virtual reality, and MR as well, mixed reality. It's just a simple, shorter term for the kind of industry itself there. And how does one person actually go about, creating their own VR or AR idea in Unity? Or let's say this bowling game exercise that we'll be doing it today. Well, you have an idea, and you bring that idea into a creation engine like Unity. And that's where you put it all together, design it, develop it, code it. And once that's completed, you push it out to one of the available SDKs or the SDKs that you want to use to then push out to the headset that you want that experience played on. And if you have questions about that, feel free to toss it in. Happy to dive into that. But with that, now that you've learned a bit about us, a little bit about Unity for those who have never heard it, today is an introduction to creating your own mini VR bowling game experience. So I would like to take this time to invite my colleague, Ozzy, onto the stage here. It's a pleasure and an honor to have Ozzy join us today to help lead this. He himself has developed various games throughout his time, taught over thousands of people how to create and manage these projects, and help various companies implement AR, VR simulations there. Ozzy, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'll jump off here for about 30, 45 minutes, everyone. I'll rejoin again. Don't forget, this is all recorded, and you will be sent these recordings and project files that Ozzy's working on either later today or early tomorrow. So you can review this on your own time if you do fall behind, or if you maybe missed something as Ozzy was working on it. But Ozzy, take it away. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you all in about 30, 45 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Steph. Hey, everyone. I wanted to start off the presentation by just kind of showing what we're going to be working on. So I'm just pulling up my screen here, and I'll just do a quick screen share for you all. And once again, hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me just fine. Ozzy, boom, Dale in the chat. Awesome. Good to see you, Dale. Dale is one of our alumni, actually. All right, let me share my screen here and we'll get it going. All right, perfect. So I've just blown up the windows here a little bit, but here you are. Hopefully the positioning of everything is right as I changed my Quest workspace. Okay, seems all right. So on the left, what you are seeing is what I'm seeing in VR. Obviously, the latency between what I'm streaming and what you guys see is going to make it a little bit more laggy. Hopefully, it's bearable. And then on the right side of the screen, you are seeing what the developer of the application typically sees as they are working on it. So let's quickly take a quick test run and see what's going on. Oh, I've got some simple cubes for hands here. Gotta find my controllers. There we go. All right, so we're gonna quickly just throw this here. Oh. I'm bad at this. There we go. And almost all of them. That should do it. All right. There we go. I'm going to take my headset off for some time and we'll talk about how we made that happen. All right, and I'll just close these windows. So voila, there we go. I'm going to lower the resolution of my screen so you guys can read everything. I just wanted a bit of a high resolution so you can see it all. And let's bring that down to about 720. Everything very easy to read for you guys. All right, now this is the software I used to make that demo. This is called Unity. And let me just quickly check the chat. Imagine streaming a VR game that's in Unity is going to kill the PC and internet. It's a little brutal, but running a game in Unity typically results in it running at a lower resolution than it would typically run at. So it's a bit easier when you're running it in Unity. So those are some of the things to keep in mind when you're working with optimization in your application. Just because it runs smooth in Unity does not mean it's going to run smooth in your final app, because the resolution might be different. All right, anyways. So a lot of you, I believe, have not seen Unity before. I saw some zeros in the chat. I'm going to quickly go over the Unity interface. So all you experienced devs out there, bear with me for the next couple minutes here. Okay, so this is Unity. I'm going to quickly go to the default layout just so that it's a little familiar, or people who open it up for the first time don't get confused as to why mine is so different. But as you can see, the layout is customizable. Now, this is the screen you'll see the first time you open up Unity. Big screen in the middle. This is the one where you as a developer kind of get to navigate your world and set up your scene, as you will. On the left here, you'll see the hierarchy window. I'll click on this little expansion button. All of the objects in your scene, such as the bowling ball, this reset button, all these pins, this lane, this camera, this reflection probe. I'm not sure why that was in there, but all these things are going to be listed here, including some other things like empty objects, and these are officially called game objects. All those things used for grouping and just for code may not be visible in the scene, but they exist. And if you added some representation for those things, you might be able to see them represented in some way. Okay, so in this workshop, we'll be using the XR Interaction Toolkit for anyone who's eager to learn. Now, on the right side is the inspector window. This tells you all the information about a given object. So if I select this ball here, this will tell me in the inspector its name, what its tag is, the layer it's in, all this information, what kind of components it has, One of which is important in our scene is the XR Grab Interactable. This is what the XR Interaction Toolkit uses to let us know that, hey, this thing you can grab. Okay, and on the bottom here is your project window. This is storing all of your assets, all the 3D models, your code, your textures, your material, your music, your whatever. It's all down here listed. Now, over here is the console tab. This is just going to show your debug logs, your errors, and your warnings, all that stuff here. And on the top here, we have the game window. This is what you will see when you hit play. There's a big play button here to test out your application in the editor, which is a huge benefit. So you can just hit play and see what's going on there. And in the asset store, that's another tab available. You can get a bunch of assets for the things I listed that go in your project window. Same thing, code, music, all that stuff. So huge benefit to demoing, and there's plenty of things you can use for your final projects. Okay, so let's go back to the scene view. Now, what we're going to do is set up a similar world to this. We'll bring in our VR rig into the scene so that we can set things up. So I think first we will actually set up the XR interaction, set up our rig, and make an object in our scene that you can grab. And then we'll set up our world with physics and such to be able to knock down some pins. We're going to include the project as well, such that you can replicate it a bit more with some of the 3D models you have here. The 3D models, by the way, are free on the asset store. But where can I get community support? Well, if you get into the course, we have office hours every Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific time and every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Alumni can just hop in there, or current students hop in there, ask questions and whatnot. Also, the Slack channel that we're in also has question and answers there. These kinds of things. So a huge growing community in the XR field is within our Slack. Okay, so with that said, this described, let's hop in and create a new scene. So the top left here, I'll see File, New Scene. We'll begin from scratch. Okay, now in my scene currently, all I have is a main camera and a directional light. Now, we'll want to set up our project such that it can actually make this into a VR rig. So some of the first things you should do is go up to the top of your window, Unity here, click on that and go down to Package Manager. The Package Manager is going to be where you're going to find the XR Interaction Toolkit. I am currently using Unity 2019.4. In Unity 2020, this won't be directly listed. All these unique packages don't get listed right away. So what you will need to do is, if you're using 2020, you'd hit this plus symbol, hit Add Packages from Git URL, and you would type into that folder, into that input field, com.unity.xr.interaction.toolkit. Again, if you're using 2020, you would say Add Package from Git URL and type this in. Don't have to worry about that. We're using 2019.4, the long-term service version. So we're just going to scroll down and see that it's listed XR Interaction Toolkit. And what I like to use, if you click on this drop down, you'll see all versions. And I've found that version 0.9.4 happens to be the most stable version of the XR Interaction Toolkit, even though 1.0 is listed. It doesn't really matter, but I would recommend going with 9.4. Okay, with that installed, once you select that version, you'll see an Update To or Install button. You would click on that and it would bring this into your package. Now, once you've done that, we want to be able to later on build it as well. So what we're going to do is go up to the top left where it says Edit. Click on Edit. Go down to Project Settings, and we have the XR Plugin Management. So that setting will give you a big button which says Install the XR Management System. So you would go once again to Edit, Project Settings. Once you are here, you would select this option, XR plugin management, and then install that XR plugin management system. Once you've done that, though, once you've installed it, you will see this drop down, this little checkbox list. And I want you to enable Oculus. And if you prefer Windows Mixed Reality, there is some workarounds to get the Vive and the Valve Index working. I personally prefer using OpenVR, but it doesn't really matter. All right, and then on this right side here, we have the Android logo. If you're using the Oculus Quest, you want to go to the Android settings and enable Oculus. Oculus Quest actually works on an Android system, so that's why we have to go over there. Okay, so now we have VR support in our project. All right, step one, to make our scene VR, we need to we have to add the XR rig. So I will actually select my main camera, right click on it and delete it. We don't want that regular camera in our scene. What we are going to do, once again, what I did was in our scene, main camera in our list here, right clicked on it, deleted it. I'm going to right click in some empty gray space or hit this plus symbol or click on game object, whichever of the three you prefer, and then scroll down to XR, and we are going to get the room scale XR rig. It's going to be perfect. You can get stationary XR and whatnot, but we'll stick with room scale. We want to be able to move around and grab stuff. So I'm going to click on this one, bring that into our scene. Bam, we have an XR rig. The XR interaction toolkit makes it a little easy for us. There we go. So with this in our scene, let's test it out. Yeah, just save this scene into our scenes folder real quick, and I'll put on my headset. All right, now I'm going to hit play here. And as you can see, my head is controlling it. My controllers are on. There we go. And you can see my hands are moving and whatnot. Okay, now for this one, we want to use the grab interactable. We don't want to use our laser pointers and stuff. So Zach, if you have convert main camera to XR rig and that's your only option, once again, make sure you're at Window, Package Manager, and you've installed the XR Interaction Toolkit. If you only have the management system, you won't see this option, which makes it a lot easier for us. You're welcome. Is it possible to build this bowling game if I don't have a VR headset with me at the time? Yeah, you can still build it. You just won't be able to test it out. Okay, so the XR Interaction Toolkit is there, and preferably 9.4. Okay, anyways, we've got this in our scene. We've got controllers set up. Some of us don't have the toolkit as a package. So once again, that may be because you have 2020 installed. If that is the case, go to Window, Package Manager, and you would type in, so you would click this plus symbol here at the top left, go to @package from Git URL, and you would type in com.unity.xr.interaction.toolkit. Right? That's how you would get it on Unity 2020. It didn't make that easier. You can also try advanced show. Oh, right. So in 2019, if you are using 2019 and you don't see it, click on advanced show preview packages. That's also the other way to see it on 2019. All right, my mistake. Thank you for reminding me of that. All right, with that closed, let's hop on over to setting up our grabbing feature. So what I'm going to do is bring in some object for us to grab. So I'll go over to our prefabs folder in our project. The 3D models folder in our project, which you will provide. You bring in 3D models to your project. So this one here has the bowling kit, and it's under prefabs. We have our ball. So I'm just going to drag and drop that into our hierarchy window, and bam, it's there. Now, This is actually massive. If you take a look at a regular person, you'll see that I right-click in here, bring in a 3D object just to show you a sense of scale. And let me just do 0.5 there. And this scale, I will quickly edit. You bring that up to a person's height. So that's like how tall a person would be. So these bowling balls are too big. So I'm going to just shrink that way down. Probably a scale of 0.1 should be good. But again, you can get your own items and the scale might be all right. So there is our bowling ball. I'm going to just put that kind of right there in front of us. Okay, so I've positioned this bowling ball. So all I did was drag and drop it into my world. I see that on the right in the top of the inspector, there's a transform component, which shows us the position, rotation, and scale of the object. Here you can say 0.1 across the X, Y, Z, and then you would see the scale become smaller. Now, moving the object, you'll see that if you use the move tool, you can also type in position values. You can use these arrows to move it around in 3D space. If you want to look around, you can use the right mouse button or hold the Alt key or Option. No, I think it's the Alt or Option key, and left click and rotate around an object. If you lose track of the object, double click on it in the hierarchy window and you can see it zooming in and out with the mouse wheel or Alt right click. All right, now while we're here, what we're going to do is make this thing grabbable. So I'll select it, and what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to add some components to it. I'm going to add a sphere collider. The sphere collider seems to be too small, so I'm going to increase the radius of that. There we go. So this determines, this green sphere kind of determines how big the physical space of this object is. Dean, do not try to follow along with us right now. This is pretty fast pace. If you already have the project, you can look through and see it, but to try and do it with me step by step at this stage would be tricky. So don't worry about your skills about following along about this. All right. So with the ball here, good. I thought I was looking. No worries, Tammy. All right. So with this ball here, I'm going to add to it a sphere collider. I'm going to add another component called a rigid body. The rigid body adds a lot of physics properties to this object, such as the ability to use gravity. I'm going to disable use gravity because I don't have a ground. I have no floor. So if I use gravity, it would just fall down forever, right? That's not what I want. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to disable use gravity. Okay, so now we have our sphere collider, we have our rigid body. Now, we needed the collider so that when our hand touches the sphere, it will know that, hey, okay, I touched the sphere. The rigid body will allow us to throw it around because that's what enables the whole forces calculations of an object, such as throwing, such as hitting something and bouncing off of it, all these kinds of things. Phil says radius as 1.54. Yeah, the radius 1.5 is good too. I'm not being too cognizant of the scale of it. 1.5 looks good though. In the sphere's radius, the sphere collider's radius, 1.5 is good. All right, now that we have this, let's add our last thing here. We want to add an XR grabbable or grab interactable script. It may be called grabbable based on the version you're using, but the XR grab interactable is the one we're looking at 2019.4 with package 9.4. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to click on that one and bam, that's it. I can now grab this object with our VR grabs controllers. All right, so with that object created, let's create some controllers. I don't need this cube here. That was just to show you a sense of height of an actual person. So with that created, I'm just going to move this closer to the center. let's take a look at our XR rig. Now our XR rig has a bunch of things under its drop down. So I'm going to expand it in the hierarchy window. Click, camera offset, not worried about that. Click again, and we have the left-hand controller and the right-hand controller. Let's double click on, well, we don't have to double click on it, but select one of these and you'll see a lot of components. Now, by default, it is using, man, in comparison to Airfill, takes most of the scripting fun away. I see. Ball would be taller than me. Yes, Peter. So this left-hand controller script currently has the XR Ray Interactor, the line renderer, and the XR Interactor line visual. It has all these components that are really designed for you to point, click, and grab something. If you want that, totally fine. I'm going to go with the actual grabbing feature instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on these little three dots or right click on the name and just do remove component. And then the XR interactor line visual, right click on that and remove component. And then the line renderer, remove component. I can't remove the line renderer first because that previous script, this one, depends on it. It requires this component and it'll prevent me from removing this if it doesn't have a line renderer. So I need to remove this first. Anyways, so we basically get rid of it, and all that should be left are the XR controllers. So once again, in case you missed it, I've selected one of our controllers, and you can select both at the same time to save you some time. I select both controllers, so control, click on the next, or hit shift and click on the next one. I've got two. I'm going to right click on the XR Ray Interactor and remove component. Right click on the XR Interactor line visual, remove component. Right click or click the three dots, remove component. So we're down to this. Once we have only this, we're going to click on add component and add the XR Direct Interactor. All right. And there we go. The Direct Interactor will allow us to grab objects. Okay. Now there's a lot of things you can do with it, such as setting the offsets and whatnot. But this should be good enough. So we've got our left-hand controllers. Now, the only thing is we don't really have a visual for our hands. Right now, if you'll wave your controllers around, you won't see anything. So what we'll do is we'll create some object to represent our hand visually. You can get an actual hand model and replace whatever I'm about to show you. But what if we also want to bat objects with our hands? So you'll be able to do that anyways. I'll show you that momentarily. So currently, if we take a look at our left and right hand, all they have are scripts. There's no way for it to tell. There's no way for it to tell when it's inside of an object, when it's hitting an object, because there's no collider. So what we're going to do is on these left and right controllers, we're going to add a component called a box collider. You can go with a sphere collider, whatever you prefer. I'll just go with boxes for now. So I've added a box collider, and once again, this box collider is really big. So what I'm going to do is just take the size of this collider and set it down to 0.1 across the board on the X, Y, and Z axis. There it is. So that's the size of our hand collision detection zone. You can adjust these a little bit more if you want, but there we go. Once you have the colliders, you're going to want to make them into triggers. This will allow the direct interactor script to determine when you're touching something. And triggers don't bump something away. They pass through objects, but they know that something is inside. Okay, now in terms of bumping objects, I'll show you that momentarily. The next thing we'll add are visuals, and that's where we'll add our colliders. So you can also add rigid bodies that are kinematic to this if you prefer. Now, the next thing I'm going to create is a prefab. I'm going to right-click in here. I'm going to go down to 3D Object Cube. Once again, a massive cube, but this time it has a visual. I'm going to shrink the scale of this down. Once again, I'll just set the size of the transform, which will also affect the box collider, 0.1. Across the board, X, Y, Z scale, and you'll see that it's scaled down, but so has its collider, but the collider is still scaled. You know, it's great. what I will do though is make the collider a little bit smaller. That would just be a rigid body. No, Peter, you would want the collider. You really need the collider for the collision detection, which is what we're adding here. So this collider, we are not making it a trigger. Making it a trigger allows it to pass through things, but allows for the on-trigger enter function to occur, which is required by the XR director controller. This way, we are just saying, okay, this is just a regular collider that bumps into things. Now, this regular collider is the same size. If I was to take a look at what's going on, I have my collider for my trigger zone, and I have my collider for my regular collision. So if there's something here and it goes to touch it, well, the collider might push it away, and the trigger zone itself may have difficulty reading it. So what we should do is we have our trigger zone as is, and then what we should do is make our actual collision zone that pushes things around a little bit smaller. So if you're near something, this area will be able to touch something and determine that, hey, I am touching something before you start pushing it away. So that's a good idea for our XR director. So reminds me the hitboxes in video games. That's exactly, Anders, that is exactly what it is. Okay, so this cube box collider, I'm just going to set the scale to 0.9 actually across the board, just so that it's a little bit smaller, right? As you can see, there's a little bit of space between the so this visual is the touch zone, and that interior collider, that bit smaller, will actually push things away. Okay, so there is our cube. I'm just gonna create another empty game object. Right click here, create empty. This one is going to be in the same spot, and it will be the parent object. I'm going to rename this to hand. Again, this makes it also a bit easier. This hand empty game object, you can replace this cube with something different. So what we're going to do is with like a hand model. But anyways, this hand empty game object, you're going to take this cube, drag and drop it onto the hand such that we form what's called a parent-child relationship. Notice I can select the hand and move it around, move it there. And if I select the hand empty game object, you'll see it's still there. But if I move the empty game object, you'll see it affects everything, as you can see. Because the child object is kind of stuck in relative position to the empty game object parent. Anyways, so there's our prefab. I'm going to go to our assets folder here. We have a prefabs folder. I created another hand earlier, but I'm going to drag and drop this hand into here. Hand one now, that's fine. So I've got this prefab created, just dragged and dropped it into my project. Now I can drag and drop several copies of it into my scene without an issue. But I don't really need any of these hands anymore. So I'm going to delete all the hands, including the one I saved into my folder earlier, and bring them in for our XR rig. And how do I do that? If I select one of the hands, the left-hand controller, you'll see in the XR controller script component, this component here, there's a model prefab property. And it says none transform. You're just going to drag and drop that hand prefab you made into that slot there. Select the right-hand controller. You'll see once again model prefab. Drag and drop this hand one prefab we created into there. I'll save my scene just in case the Unity crashes on me. I'm going to hit the play button. I'll see it in action. Okay, I'm going to just move myself a little bit forward. Let's split this layout so we can see both things at the same time. All right. Let me move this a little bit closer to us. All right, here we go. There's our hands. So there we go. Now I can reach out, squeeze the grip on my controller. You can see I can move this around. There we go. And if I want, move back, I can push this thing around. Well, most of the time. Anyways, one thing you'll notice is if I'm getting closer to it, you'll be starting to see through it. That is because of a near clipping plane. So if you want to avoid that issue, I would select your main camera. Let me get out of play mode first. I would select your main camera, and in the camera component, you'll see there's a clipping plane thing. It says near. Just decrease that to 0.1, such that if I'm looking near it, it won't right away clip. If I go back in, now I can see my hands right up to my face. Hopefully I don't punch my screen here, and I can bring this guy right up to my face. Now, another cool thing, already I can throw it. Just like that. The Grab Interactable allows you to throw things as well. Just with this small interaction, you can make a lot of cool applications. Are these scripts, XR controller, present within the assets when we download the file? Yes, that is correct. Perfect. It's the same for all of us, but it's enough to learn the concept. Great. I believe so, David. All right, so with that, let's talk about setting up some pins for us to hit and knock over. Just a second. Okay, now in here, in the same scene, we can set up those guys, those pins. What we'll do is, let me just set up something ahead of line. All right. What I'm going to do is create some pins down here, not too far away, for us to throw at. So if we go down to our assets, back into our assets folder, there's the 3D models folder. In the 3D models folder, there's a bowling kit, Kegel and ball. And in our prefabs folder, there is some Kegels, some of the things that you knock over. I'm just going to drag and drop one into our scene. And once again, you can see it's massive. I'm just going to shrink it way down, like that size. Maybe that should be good. Okay, so there's my Kegel. I am also going to create a plane. I'm going to right-click in here, 3D object, plane. So I have a floor. I'm just going to reset its position for now. There we go. And I'll scale it such that, it stretches out. And in this project, we also have, maybe not that large. Maybe I'll shrink it sideways a little bit, And then I will move it forward as if it's a bowling lane. And in our assets folder, once again, there is a material folder. And in there, I have created for you a bowling lane material. If you go to the submaterials folder, there's the bowling lanes folder. Bam. It looks like it's sideways, so I'm going to quickly swap that out. Let's make the X 1.9 instead, and the Z, the previous one. Let me rotate this guy around. Should be like this, I believe. And we are going to make this 1.9. There we go. And the other one, I think we'll just say 2 and 0.2. So 2 in the X and 0.2 in the Z. That should give us good enough dimensions. There we go. So once again, what I did here was right-clicked, created a 3D object plane, and then on the plane, I added our go to Assets, Materials folder, Submaterials folder, this bowling lane thing. Bam, there it is. Now, it seems to be sideways, so you're just going to rotate it, which would be 90 degrees in the Y. Just type in 90 there. And it seems a little too wide, so I'm going to scale it by switching to the Scale tool, which is R. And I can shrink it from the side here and perhaps elongate it vertically. And then you can position it 0, 0, 0 in the XYZ, and then just move it forward in front of the player. These kinds of things. So that's the goal for positioning this lane. Now, once we have this lane set up, I'm going to take this Kegel, this Kegel object, and just move it way down the lane. Perhaps that far is too far. Maybe I'll shrink this down a little bit. Not that good at bowling. Yeah, move this up a little bit more. Okay, so there I have my bowling pin. Now, we want this guy to behave like a Kegel. We want it to be knocked down and kind of flop around, not just flat and then roll. So what we can do is make this Kegel reactive to our physics. So how are we going to do that? Once I have this way it's set up is it has an empty game object and then the 3D model is a child, but that doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the actual Kegel. I'm going to go over here where it says add component, click on that, and I'm going to select a capsule collider. So I typed in the word capsule and I found collider. So you can see this capsule collider is really small. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is increase the height and such. A nice way to do this, a nice easy way to do this would be to click on this edit collider button, click on one of these little squares, bring it up such that it makes sense. Oh, looks like I'm getting another scam call from the other side of the world. Sorry about that. Anyways, bring that up. Oh, let's bring out the bottom of it a little bit so that it lines up with the floor there. Okay, so I've lined up this collider. To be exact, I would probably want 5.5 for the height, and the position I probably want 2.75. If you wanted to enter some values for the capsule collider, that seems to be good. Now, I want it to behave a little bit better than a straight up capsule collider. So what I'm going to do to this thing is I'm going to also add a sphere collider for its center here. So I'm going to click on add component, sphere collider. And then I'm just going to take this center Y position, move it up kind of into the thick of it, and then increase the radius. Right, so I've actually used 2 colliders to get a physics behavior that's more appropriate. Because now when it falls over, it's not going to be flat and have, you know, part of it inside of the ground. Or if I made the capsule too thick, it would have very strange behavior. So you can use things like these techniques where you use a combination of colliders to get a more appropriate behavior, or you can take it a step further and use a mesh collider. So if I remove these, I add a component, I can add a mesh collider. And then in the mesh collider, I can search for a mesh Kegel, and there you go. And so this would be even better, except it would take perhaps an unnecessary amount of colliders, right? The more complex your collider is, the more, you know, processing power it requires. So technique I showed you earlier is good for what we needed to do. It's perfect, and you shouldn't see any problems with that either. But in case you want it to be perfect, you can use a mesh collider. Now, that I might mark this. I don't think I want to mark this as convex. Now, this causes some problems with physics behavior, but this should be okay. So now with a mesh collider, the other thing is I want to add a rigid body to it. So if I add component rigid body, this will allow it to react to forces. You'll notice that the mesh collider won't work so well anymore, but that's fine. Okay, so I've got the Kegel. You may need to make the mesh collider convex, but there it is. I've got the Kegel, and I'm going to duplicate this. Hold the control key, press D to duplicate, or right click on it and duplicate. And I'm just going to move it over here to fix this relationship here. I'm going to duplicate it again, move it here, duplicate it again, again, until I've fit in all the slots. Because the behavior, really all I need for it is to be static, right? Just needs to stay there. So I've got the Kegels standing in the end. I've got my ball ready to smack at it. Now, it's going to be hard to emulate the bowling unless this ball falls to the ground. So I need to select this ball. I need it to have gravity. Now, unfortunately, if I say play, this thing will fall straight down before I even get to grab it. So we want to avoid such things. What I'll do is I'll create a table for this ball. So I'm going to right click in here. I'll double click on the ball first, so my focus is on it, and then I'll right click 3D object cube. I've created a cube. Unfortunately, this ball is inside the cube, which would result in it kind of exploding out. At least I'll just put this cube here. All right, let's put this ball on to the table. All right. I'm just going to create a couple of them because I'm not amazing at bowling and I don't want to, miss completely. So I'm just going to give myself some extra chances. All right, let's try that out. All of them have gravity, so hopefully this, I don't miss all three. So I'm going to hit play once again. I've saved my scene. Every time before I hit play, I save my scene. Make that a force. It looks like those things are falling over. And the Kegels might be having, their colliders may not be perfect for what we're trying to do. So if we hit play, I think the base colliders that they have are a little too round. They don't fit too well on this. Let me just try and see if I can flatten them to the ground a little bit. Oh, I missed a Kegel there. Go. Try and flatten them to the ground. See if that, hopefully that addresses that issue. I'm going to hit play one more time. If it falls over, I might need to switch to convex. Right, so there's the issue. A non-convex mesh collider with a non-kinematic rigid body is no longer supported. So I will need to make it convex. So hopefully it doesn't fall through. Perfect. Okay, yeah, so it's stable now. All right, so I'm going to put on my headset and let's try it out. Yeah, I was unsure, but I do remember something like that being an issue. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to smash my computer screen, I'm sure of it, so bear with me. Let's try this out. All right, I'm a little bit of a ways from the my rig is a little bit of a ways from the balls for me to reach, so I'm just going to move these over here a little bit closer to me. There we go. Give me a few more chances. Whoa. No, okay, that's fine. That's why I had a rim in the other one. That banged my the guy there. I'm just going to get in and out of play mode again. By the way, this one allows you to swap hands quite easily. All right, that one looks like it's going. Kind of slow, but it'll make it. I'm sure of it. Right, it made it there, but the force wasn't enough. Bear with the fact that I'm still sitting in my chair and there's stuff around me, so it's a bit hard to throw. So another thing you want to add when it comes to these kind of interactions, if you go back to your project window, I'm going to go to my materials folder, and I'm going to create a physics material. And I'll call it slip. I would say slippery, but I have one created. Now this lip physics material, you'll see it has a few options. And the dynamic and static friction are kind of high. So I'm going to reduce those to 0. And when it comes to interacting with another object, I'm going to say the friction combine will be minimum, whatever has the least, which it will have. So now when it hits something, it'll be slippery and it'll slide through. So to make it work, I'm going to select the balls there. You'll see that the sphere collider has a material property. Just drag and drop the slip there. And so now when you throw it, it will slide instead of roll. It will slip across. So it'll be able to maintain a bit of a faster speed. I'm going to see if I can do this from a safe distance. So give me a moment here. I'm going to save that one last time, and then we'll have our bowling interaction. I think I started it with my hands in it. One sec. Once again, terrible at bowling, but I knocked one pin over, and you notice how much faster it was sliding across the thing because we added a slippery physics material. And once again, the properties for that one were 0 in both dynamic and static friction, and the friction combine was minimum. This determines how the behavior for its slip should be, really, and we just went with minimum instead of it taking the average between the two, because this plane has its own friction. By default, it's 0.6. So instead of, it being a combined average, which would make it 0.3, we just said go with the minimum, so 0. Anyways, there we go. We have our bowling setup. Now, if you want to take this a step further, you can create a little pit here so it doesn't roll off. You can also add a giant trigger zone. So I would add, say, a giant cube. Let's zero this out here. So the additional thing you can add is add this giant cube into our world and just shrink its y-axis down a bit. It doesn't need to be that large. And move it below the scene like this. Move it below the scene such that, and then this mesh, this cube, you can remove the mesh renderer, remove the mesh filter, because we don't need to see it. And what you can do is have a trigger that has a script on it that says, okay, whenever something touches this trigger zone that's below the lane, move this ball back to this position. As you have unlimited shots at it. You can create a reset button and all these things, which all of those are available in our project for you guys to check out, kind of more little interaction features. But I hope that was informative for you all. A scoreboard would be cool. You can use some text there. I would suggest using some alternative to UI text in world space, just because that's a little inefficient in VR. But you do what you'd like to do. Text Mesh Pro. Yeah, that would be better. But apart from that, guys, thank you all for attending. I hope that was fun to see, hope fun to work on. We have a GitHub link that we can post into the scene here. Let me pull that up. Let's post that. Oh, thank you, Dan. And it was a pleasure meeting with you. I look forward to the Q&A section where we'll get to talk back and forth a little bit with you guys. And Steph, thanks for taking back up here. You guys have a great day.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, Ozzy. That's great. I'll definitely have to recreate this one on my own time as well. But let me share my screen here again. I'm going to take about 5-10 minutes to wrap things up here quickly, and then we'll open it up for our in-depth Q&A session. So if there are any questions that you guys have, please toss them into the questions tab. By the end, in the next 5-10 minutes, it allows us to see what we haven't answered, what things are still sticking around. So please do toss them into the questions tab. We'll get to the questions in about 5-10 minutes here. But I'm going to toss in another poll here. And I would love to know, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this workshop to others? 0 being you wouldn't recommend it to anyone, you'll never come back. 10 being you would recommend it to others and you will come back to one of our workshops here. So I just tossed in the poll there. It allows us to really gauge whether or not we should continue working and creating these workshops, maybe bring in some other game and experiences there. So it really helps us out to know how we did. Would you recommend it to others? And should we keep doing this type of stuff? But with that, we have people joining us from all walks of life. And I know we flew through the content quite quickly, but again, feel free to take that recording that we will send over, work it on your own time. And again, people join us from all walks of life, whether it's a personal interest, whether they're looking to upskill themselves, maybe land a career in this industry or with a studio. And these are just a few examples that we have of some of our alumni. Mike Oakes just recently went from Circuit Stream and got a job with Unity here in Calgary, Alberta, where we're actually headquartered out of. We also had Jennifer Swan and various other students get accepted into Oculus's Launchpad program using the Circuit Stream project that they had created with us. Now, we also have people who took what they've learned in our courses and start their own companies, whether it's consultancy or content creation, such as Matt DeLallo, XR designer who's launched Lucky VR. So do check that out. He will also be joining us and Kyle next week, or in 2 weeks, my apologies, for our course information session. So feel free to join us for that one if you have any questions about our programs that we can answer for you. Now, again, if you're a beginner, for those of you who said, 0 to, let's say, 3, 4, 5 in Unity, we have our XR Development with Unity course. And this is 10 weeks long, beginner friendly, 4 hours per week, 3 hours in class with 1 hour private session to help work on your own projects, something that you care about to show for by the end. The full price of the course is $39.50. The next one starts on February 15th, and then every 2.5 months from then on. I think the one following that will be at the end of April 27th. Now, for this course here, there's no experience required, so beginners have no fear. Again, we welcome everyone from all walks of life to help them learn how to create these experiences from scratch. And again, we have a course information session on this beginner-friendly program on the 27th of January, hosted by my colleague Kyle here, you may have seen in the chat, and Matt DeLallo, one of our alumni. Now, for those of you who are more experienced in Unity and the C# coding, really looking to take your projects or ideas to the next level, learn some more in-depth things like design and motion and physics, we have our intermediate and advanced course, the XR Project Accelerator program, which is 8 weeks long, 6 hours a week. 3 of those hours are in class and 3 private sessions each week to help accelerate the design and those projects that you all come in with. Now, for both of these courses, we have payment plans available from 3-month plans to 6-month plans and 12-month payment plans. Now, for those of you who might have a team interested in learning more about this, maybe you're working on a project but need some additional support, we have team training opportunities available, custom schedule and content really tailored towards your team there. Again, we also have various shorter courses for C# scripting, for intro to XR design, all the design features of it, the Oculus Quest development course, and a HoloLens specific course. So feel free to check out those shorter courses if you'd rather learn about a specific topic instead of the entire development process there. And again, myself, my colleague Kyle, and Vladimir here you've seen in the chat would be more than happy to help answer any questions you have. So please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us and we'd be happy to support you any way we can. But with this, I would like to bring Ozzy back onto the stage here. We're getting into our Q&A session. I know we have quite a few questions here. So I myself am going to pop into the questions tab and see what we've got going. Welcome back, Ozzy.
Hey, thank you.
So let's make your screen here a little larger. And we will start with the non-answered questions. So Ozzy, Let's see what we got here. So about an hour ago, Andrew had a question here. I'm going to toss it in as a live question. Is VRTK v4 something that you work with, or something that these people would potentially work with?
So I have worked with it in the past. It was created by one individual who ended up getting a job because they made it. But I'm reluctant to implement something like that in our projects, just because we don't know what will happen with it down the line, if they abandon it, or if it's even going to be compatible with some of the newer technologies that are out there. So I try not to rely on something an individual's made on the side, and rather use something from Unity themselves or Steam themselves.
Right. That makes sense. Perfect. And then I have a question here from Aditya. And Aditya was asking, while making XR applications, should we create in real life scale? And if so, do you have any tips to get accurate scale on environments or objects?
Yes. Yep. In VR, if you're trying to make an immersive experience of like a person being somewhere, then yes, you should use real life scale. However, perhaps your application is to be a giant, right? There is this great game called Exodus. This is an asymmetric VR experience where one person is this giant machine, and all their friends are playing as tiny robots and running around in a factory, and the giant machine is trying to find the detector, what would they be called? The detractors, and melt them into lava, basically. Acorn is an amazing example of this as well. You're a giant tree, and your friends are on their mobile devices playing as little squirrels trying to get these acorns, I believe. But yeah, that would be up to you how you want to do that. Now, in terms of a technique, you could, if you want to eyeball it, you would use a cube, set it to a scale of 1.7, 1.78, about, because that one is 1 meter, right? Starts off 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. I think average is like 1.7. I think that was the height Oculus uses. So you can set the size of that to 1.7 in the Y, and then you get a sense of how tall a person is. That can help you eyeball it. But in your 3D modeling software, you have measurements there, so you can use them as needed.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, I'm sorry if you feel that way. We are getting through all the questions. This is like one of the first questions, I believe. So hopefully we come across yours soon.
It is. So there's one here from Peter, and hopefully this is the one. Is the Rift CV1 no longer a device that people want to develop with said device in mind?
The CV1, that's one of the old ones. I think Oculus is really gearing to just make the Oculus Quest a thing, not really relying on the Rifts anymore. They're trying to make the Oculus Quest and Rift and the Link, the original Rift. Yeah, the original Rift. So I don't think they'll be relying on that anymore. Quest 1, Quest 2 is the way, as Alex says. They're going to try and maintain the Link, so it's as if you're developing for Rift. You believe that the original Rift is better than the Rift S or Quest? It was a bit of a parallel movement, I guess. They didn't make too many visual improvements from the Rift and the Rift S. Thanks for the informative session. You're welcome, Jamie.
Perfect. I hope that answers your question there, Peter. And then there's another question here I have from Rebecca. Rebecca's asking, how do you give the player, let's say the one in the headset, collision detection so you don't have the issue of seeing through objects?
Okay, I love this system. So one thing you can do is, I actually use this in my game, so hopefully I can just share that real quick and I'll show you how that works. Let me pull that up real quick. I think I have it ready. I'll just share my screen, Rebecca, and I can show you what I mean. The idea is basically that you would give your head a collider, but you would apply it to the XR rig. I'll just show you real quick how one does that. Sorry, while that's loading, we'll take another question while that's loading, and we'll come back to this one.
Perfect. Sounds good. Let's see. Going from the oldest ones here still. This one's from Ashton, and Ashton is saying his hands were anchored. So how is that? Like, how does he fix that?
My hands are anchored. How do I fix it? I'm not sure what that question means. My hands are anchored. How do I fix it? Could you expand on that question there in the chat still?
Yeah, we'll see if he reaches out here in the chat. My hands are anchored. How do I fix this? I assume it's when he was doing the bowling stuff there. So we'll see, Ashton. If you're still here with us, feel free to expand a little bit more on that question there, and we'll be sure to cover it for you. Perfect. So
okay, now while we're doing that, I have loaded the project. Fortunately, some lighting issues recently with it, as I tried to mess around with optimization. So ignoring the lighting, let's take a look. All right, I'll just share my screen again. Can you see my screen all right?
No, so I don't think you're sharing anything.
Okay, let me try again. All right, there we go. So hopefully this doesn't get conflicted by the other things that are happening in the scene. But there we go. Okay, so there's our VR rig. So the rig itself is not the head, but it controls the whole entirety of the object, the entirety of the player, such as it is encapsulating the controllers and the head. Now, what we end up doing is in the script, if I pull this up, oh, I meant to click on edit script. Give that a sec. And just hit right click on that, edit script. Essentially what's happening is we have these two colliders, one for the feet and one for the head, that control the XR rig. And all they do is, so we have the head and the feet, and then the actual VR head. Get a reference to the head. I'll probably drag and drop it later, but we take the feet collider and set it to the position of the head's X position and Z position, but the Y position is static for the feet length. And then the head center, the collider for the head, its center position matches the VR head's local position. So what ends up happening is that these colliders are totally unassociated with the VR rig, or I should say the VR player. Hopefully this works when I put this on. But you can see how, let me just move this up and down. You can see how I move my head around, but the rig, the head and feet do come with it. Now you can add some leeway using colliders for the feet, using rigid body for the feet. But the idea now, let's see if I can get that back on, is if I move the entirety of the rig, let's say right to a wall, right? If I move it right to a wall and I try to look through it, I'm bumping my head and it's pushing me back away. So you can implement something like that, Rebecca.
Perfect. Now Ashton did get back with that with the anchored hands, and Ashton was hoping, or was essentially saying, so he did what you said to do, and it's in the chat here if you wanted to check it out. Moved it to the left and right hands on prefabs, and when he pressed play, the hands were stuck together in front of him, not being able to move at all.
And moved it to the left and right hands on prefab. Okay, let me repeat part of that exact step, and let's see if perhaps doing it maybe you ended up doing it slightly different. Enough such that it conflicts, but I'll pull that up momentarily, Ashton. In the meantime, as that's loading, it's oh no, that loaded. Okay,
Perfect.
so once again, what I did though, and let me know if this is exactly what you did. So I right-click in here. I have an empty game object. Its position is irrelevant in this case, but we should set it to 0, 0, 0. So I have this empty game object positioned at 0, 0, 0. And what I'm going to do with this empty game object next is I'm going to right-click on it, 3D object, cube, right? So this cube now is at 0, 0, 0 as a child of the game object. So great. I'm just going to make that child object scale of 0.1 across the board. Let's just make it smaller. Anyways, that's good enough for now. Now I'm going to save this game object here. That's it. Now, if I go to the XR rig, click on one of these hand controllers, you have the model prefab section. Drag and drop this prefab into there. Select the right hand controller, drag and drop the same prefab into there, and it will represent the left and right hand. Is that exactly what you did? Because I'm not sure what you were referring to with anchors. So I did what you said and moved it to the left and right hands on prefabs. Here's the model from the prefabs. When I pressed play, the hands were stuck in front of me, not being able to move. So if they're not moving, it might be that the controllers are not being detected. That's possible. Otherwise, that could be the case. But yeah, so those two steps, model prefabs on left and right. If it's still not working, let's see if the controller, yeah, so it might be the controllers are not detecting. And the steps for enabling VR may need to be implemented again. But in the meantime, Steph, can you show the next question?
Definitely. So I'd hate for this workshop to run too long with all the questions. So I'm going to answer the most upvoted questions first, and then we'll go into the recent ones. So there's one from Mercedes here, and she's asking, how would you add sound to this ball when it hits the ground?
Sure thing. Okay. So if you wanted to add sound effects and such, what you would do is, let's say the ball, it has a sphere collider and it has a grab interactable. What I would do is I would create, let's go to a scripts folder. I would create a new C# script called ball hit sound. Let's say the name is arbitrary, but let's just say I called it ball hit ball. So I right-clicked in here, create C# script, ball hit sound. So I click on that, and what I would do in here is would get a reference to an audio source. So audio source is simply a place where it's a component in Unity. Make it public or serialize a private variable, either or. And I'll just call it m_as. And I'll say void on collision enter. So the moment it hits something, this is a variable that tells us when something hits something. And if that's the case, you just say m_as dot play. That would be the code you write. The public audio source, m_as, that's one line I wrote there. And these couple lines here, on collision enter is a function built into Unity that lets you say, okay, when something hits something. You can get more information about that, but all you really need is to say as.play. Once you have that, you would select your balls. Select all your balls. Click and drag this ball hit sound script into the inspector with all of them selected. Otherwise, you have to manually do it for all of them. Select all of them. Then add a component called an audio source. Now, they have the ability to make sounds. Now, you need to drag and drop the appropriate audio source into the appropriate hit sounder. So this one, drag and drop its audio source there. This one, drag and drop its audio source there. and the other ball, drag and drop its audio source there. Now, if you only had one ball, great, set it up and then you can duplicate it. But in this case, I already have 3, so I'll have to do it for all of them, or delete the other 2, do it for 1, and then duplicate them again. But so there you go. You set up the audio source. Now, you need to get a sound file, a WAV or an MP3 file in your project. Click and drag it into here, and then it will work. That's it. So whenever the ball hits something, it will play a sound. Now, if you want it to only detect it if it hits the lane, because punching it with your hand would make the sound as well, what you could do is select your plane. There's a little tag section, it says untagged. Click on that and add a tag. And then in here, you're in the tags and layers section. Hit the plus, and we can say, I can create a tag called lane, save that. Select this plane again, change the tag to lane. Once I have that, I'm going to go back to our script and then add a condition, an if statement here. If collision.collider.tag equals, and then in quotes, lane. And then create the scope of that if statement that lets us say, okay, only do this thing if you hit something that is tagged as collider. I wonder if I can just do collision.tag. No, yeah, I didn't think so. Okay, but yeah, so on collision enter, you hit something, we say, okay, if the thing you hit is tagged as lane, which we just did in Unity, then play the sound. Otherwise, don't play it at all. So that's your alternative for more precise hitting. Probably want to continue until he hits pins. Yeah, you could do that as well. You could have an audio source that plays forever. So you can have an audio source that plays forever. And then you have another thing here on collision enter when you hit a new thing. Else if, do this again. Collision.tag equals pin. So I already have a tag called pin, and I've tagged all those pins as pin already. Then you would say yes dot stop, perhaps. You could stop the pin. You could stop the audio source when it hits the pin. You could add another variable up here that's an audio clip. And this is m_pin hit sounds. Pin hit sounds. Let's go with that. We have a variable up here storing an audio clip. So you stop the audio when it hits a pin. You then say ams.clip equals m_pin hit sounds. And then you say m_as.play once again. And then so, you play the sound when it hits the lane. It's just a really long, like it hitting the ground and rolling. That's the sound you find and then, or make. And the collision when it hits the pin, you stop that sound. You change the clip on the audio source. So instead of it's, and then you play that sound, that kind of thing. You could do something like that too.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there anything else to touch up on this here?
I think that's good.
Perfect. Awesome. Great question, Mercedes. Great question. So we'll take about another 10 minutes or so to answer some of these questions here. I'm going from the most upvoted ones. Let's make sure I didn't lose any. Nope. So here we have a question from Galen, and Galen's asking, is it possible to export your game and send it to a friend to play on their rig?
Just the playing? Sure, you could. If you get out of this mode here, you go up to the top left, you go File, Build Settings. Make sure your scene that you're working on is in the build settings. You would do that by clicking Add Open Scenes, right? I'm going to remove this one because I already have the sample scene there. So you would do that, make sure that this is there. And if it's a PC build, just hit Build. It will make a playable copy, and then you can send them the whole build folder. So I would click Build, I would create a new folder called builds. And then when I select that folder, it will build out the entirety of the app. So I select it. It will take a second. It will build the whole, the other scene here. This is just the workshop scene, but the other one, it will build it out. You can send him that whole folder. There is a file in it that's a executable file. They would double click that. Bam, it would run for them. Yeah, so there you go. If I go to my builds folder, there is the game. You can send them these files, and they can run this file here, and it will run the application.
Perfect. Easy peasy, hey?
Yeah, indeed.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Galen. I have a question here from my man, Anil. Anil's asking, how do you calculate the number of kegels or pins down by the ball? I guess to use this for the scoring feature.
Down by the ball. Okay, so I did something like that where I knocked them all over, and once they're all knocked down, I made some fireworks basically happen. So the way I did that, check for pins knocked. It was a little cheesy, but basically I had a public game object, which is a particle system, but yours could be whatever. We have a integer that's counting how many pins there are, and since it's public, you can change it in the inspector if you add more. We say on trigger exit. Every time a pin leaves the trigger zone, we subtract how many pins are up. Every time the pin leaves the trigger zone, we count it. So let me show you in the other scene before this stops making sense. So if I go to the sample scene here, you'll see, this is kind of hidden in there, but you'll see that there is a zone here. Where is this? Recovery? No. It's the scene pin checker. So I put a little trigger collider at the top of the pins. So every time you hit them, they knock over, and there's an on trigger exit function. And so the on trigger exit, all it does is it tracks, we know the pins are 10. So you can see the pin checker. I typed in 10. And it says, okay, pin count starts at 10. Every time you leave the exit, we check the tag, what left the trigger zone. Okay, it's tagged as pin. We reduce the pin count. The pin count becomes 0. I turned on a particle system, but you can, every time the trigger zone is left, you can use this pin count to determine a score, that kind of thing.
Perfect. Great question, Anil. So one here from Rebecca, and she's asking, how would you go about creating a reset button in VR?
Okay. In VR, it's funny, the reset. So this is what I used currently. I wouldn't recommend using this too much because I'm loading a whole nother scene. What I would do is kind of do some asynchronous loading when it comes to another scene. It's because when you load a scene, it does freeze for a second, right? Kind of unavoidable. Well, unless the scene's very simple, you might not notice it, but it takes a little bit of loading. So what you could do is have a scene completely off, and then kind of when you switch to that scene, slowly turn on all the objects, because if you have a bunch of awake statements, a bunch of start functions, and you load that scene, bam, all of them are trying to run, so it can slow it down a little bit. So there's techniques like that. You can do some asynchronous loading. In our case, just restarting, I just reload the same scene. So I get scene management. I created a button, so if the player touches the button, we just say, okay, scene manager, load scene 0, because in the build settings, I added the scene as 0 and just reload it as single, so it just restarts it. It's the easy way to do it. Otherwise, you can go through and set up a prefab instance, something like that, where if the pins get knocked down, they fall, they're gone, you destroy them, and then you instantiate all of them again. Or have them kind of, once they're knocked down, you hit the reset button, you snap them all to the same place again. These kinds of things. There's a lot of things you could do. That one's probably the hardest, but yeah.
Perfect. So we'll We'll take a few more questions here, and I know there's a lot more that we haven't got to, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us, whether it's by email, LinkedIn, Slack. We'd be more than happy to help because there are quite a few still that we need to get through. But I'll be looking for, here's a quick run from Charles Baker. Do you recommend the Oculus Link cable or one of the cheaper ones? I myself got some compatible cables from Amazon and an extender. But Ozzy, what do you say about that one?
I've used both. I don't notice the difference.
Okay.
I would just take a cheaper one, honestly.
Whatever floats your boat. I'd say if you prefer the Link, you'd be good to go with that one. If you want to grab some compatible ones on Amazon, that's what I did, and it works just fine. So I have one from Dimitrios here. How different is Unity's new VR action-based input system?
Oh man, substantially. I don't know if you're comparing it to OpenVR or not, but it's very different. A lot. They're trying to just make it so that there's very little coding required. I don't personally like that. I like coding, so I like setting up my own input systems. But yeah, it's quite different.
Perfect. Awesome. And then let's do 2-3 more questions here. Here's one from Summer, and he's asking, what is needed to create an online multiplayer VR application other than Unity?
Well, you need a server or creating a client-side multiplayer session system. You can do this in Unity. It's quite a bit of work to do it only in Unity. You can take a look at something like Pun or Photon. Yeah, Photon, for example, is one of the solutions. There's quite a few options out there. Valem has a yeah, the link in the chat there by Scott. That's a good one.
Perfect. Then we've got one from Momina asking about the ball. Do you hold the ball with 2 cubes? Is the cube performing like a magnet? Does it stick with the ball and then you can throw it?
So you in this thing, in the way the XR Interaction Toolkit is set up, you're not able to hold it with 2 cubes. You hold it with one. If you grab it with another, it will switch to only work with that other hand, right? That kind of thing. You can switch it back and forth, but only one hand. Is performing like a magnet? It would be like as if it's stuck to it, like infinitely strong, sticking to that kind of thing. They basically make the thing a child of the hand, basically.
Perfect.
But you can change the style of grabbing. Yep, Scott is right there. But that's what's happening. What was the rest of that question?
So the rest of that question, let me just find it because I just answered it. Momina. So it was, do you hold the ball with the cubes? Is the cube performing like a magnet? Does it stick with the ball and you can throw it?
Yeah, I think that's, we answered it. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Then for the last question here, this one's from Marc Julien, and he's asking, the default resolution when you run this in the Quest is pretty low. What settings can you adjust to get a game to run on the Quest and the Quest 2 at their native resolutions? And how do you make it so it enables fixed foveated rendering on the Quest and disable it on the Quest 2?
I see. There is a way to do application.runtime.platform. There's this line of code. I don't recall it offhand. I'm not sure you can distinguish between the Quest and the Quest 2 at this time. There might be a subtle description. I'll have to take a look on the Oculus documentation. But if you want to adjust the native resolution, there is graphics settings. You may be able to adjust it there within Unity's settings there. If I go to edit, project settings, let's see. We have graphics, and let's see here. Was under graphics, or I think you may be able to edit it in the game view there, but under one of these. resolution, and let's go to Android. Custom. Yeah, I'll have to look into it again. I don't recall how to force a resolution to something.
Perfect. And this
Try and get an answer to you after.
Alrighty, this was for, I'm just going to make sure that's Marc Julien. We'll make sure to get back to that one. Marc, thanks for asking that question. And with that, we are running close to the limit here. So for all of those questions that were left unanswered, we will get a copy of all those questions and get back to you all as best as we can. But I do appreciate you all joining us for this workshop. I hope you all enjoyed it and will start creating, if not already created, this VR bowling game to try out and test yourselves. With that, we do have a workshop next week, more so related to augmented reality. So feel free to join us on that one, which will be hosted by my colleague, Vlad. And then in a couple of weeks here, we have our course information session again, hosted by my colleague, Kyle, and one of our alumni is joining us for that workshop. And again, come in with any burning questions you have. We'd be more than happy to answer those for you. So with that, thank you everyone again for joining us for this workshop. It's always fun to put these on, a pleasure to have you all. And again, we do hope to catch you on the next workshops here at CircuitStream. I wish you all a wonderful day, a great evening, potentially even morning, depending on where you're located. And with that, I thank you all again for joining us. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Ozzy, the man, the myth, the legend, thank you very much again for helping out with this workshop here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me once again. I'll see you guys in class, hopefully. Once again, thanks for coming, guys.
Have a wonderful day.
Right on.
Take care, everyone.